Captain Marcus Graves crouched behind the smoldering wreckage of what had once been a thriving human city. Now, it was just another battlefield, a scar on Earth's surface, a reminder of what had been lost in the wake of the Vexari invasion. The air was thick with smoke, and the ground was littered with broken vehicles, charred debris, and the remnants of his fallen comrades. A low hum filled the air, the sound of distant explosions and gunfire mingling together in a chorus of war. Graves could feel the vibrations underfoot. The Vexari weren't just here to conquer, they were here to obliterate. "Graves, you there?" The voice came through his comms, sharp and filled with urgency. It was Lieutenant Olivia Kane, his most trusted officer. She'd been by his side through countless missions, always quick to act and sharper than any blade. "I'm here," Graves replied, keeping his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. "We're going to need to move fast. Their reinforcements are coming in hard. Do we have eyes on the enemy, Commander?" "Affirmative. We've got eyes on the target, but we're pinned down. More Vexari landing every minute. We'll need backup to hold this line." Graves didn't hesitate. The mission was clear. The Vexari had been systematically slaughtering civilians, leaving nothing but ruins in their wake. Earth's last resistance had made a stand here, in the heart of what used to be the capital. The Vexari had underestimated humanity's will to fight, but now, the clock was ticking. They were on the brink of losing everything. And the Vexari commander, their leader, the one orchestrating the invasion, was here. Killing him could give humanity its first real chance at a counteroffensive. "Hold tight," Graves muttered, standing up from his cover. "We're not backing down. Let's finish this." The Vexari command post was ahead, nestled in the center of the ruined city. Graves could see the outlines of their heavily fortified structure, surrounded by walls of alien metal and energy fields. It was a fortress, designed to withstand everything humanity had thrown at it so far. But they had a secret weapon, one they hadn't used yet, a weapon that could turn the tide of the war. Graves crouched low and signaled to Kane. She and the rest of his squad were positioned in the shadows, waiting for his command. They'd fought together too many times to count, and each time, they'd survived by relying on their instincts, their trust in each other. "On my mark," Graves whispered, his voice barely audible over the distant rumble of the ongoing battle. He activated his comms again. "We're hitting them hard. Kane, take out the left flank. I'll go in through the front." "Roger that," came her reply, a sharpness in her tone that matched his own resolve. "We'll provide cover." With a nod, Graves sprinted across the open ground, moving quickly and silently, his armor blending with the shadows. The Vexari hadn't spotted him yet, but he knew the moment they did, all hell would break loose. He reached the command structure's entrance, a massive door made of alien alloys that glowed with an eerie light. His fingers hovered over the device to breach it, but just as he was about to enter the code, a voice crackled through his comms. "Graves, we've got company," Kane warned, her voice strained. "The Vexari have deployed their elite soldiers. They're not holding back." Graves didn't flinch. He'd been in worse situations before. "Just buy me some time," he growled. He punched in the code, and the door slid open with a hiss. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The command center was massive, filled with high-tech alien consoles and holographic displays. The Vexari were busy coordinating their attack, their eyes locked on the vast displays of Earth's destruction. The commander, Vexar, their ruthless leader, stood at the center, his eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. "You're finished, human," Vexar sneered, his voice echoing through the command center as Graves stepped in. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. His rifle was already raised, and he fired before the alien could make another move. The shot took out one of the Vexari officers, a clean hit to the chest. Vexar turned, his face contorting with rage. "Do you think you can stop us?" Vexar hissed, his voice dripping with venom. He raised a weapon unlike anything Graves had ever seen, an energy pulse gun capable of disintegrating anything in its path. Graves ducked, his instincts kicking in. He fired again, narrowly missing as Vexar activated his shield. The alien leader was fast, his movements graceful despite the massive armor he wore. But Graves wasn't just another soldier. He'd faced worse. "You're not leaving here alive." Graves spat, using the confusion of the initial firefight to reposition himself behind cover. He knew Vexar was powerful, but humanity's greatest strength had always been its unpredictability. Outside, the battle raged on, but Graves' focus was entirely on the Vexari commander. Every fiber of his being was screaming to take the shot, to finish what he started, but something in Vexar's eyes told him this wasn't going to be easy. "You've already lost," Vexar sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You just don't know it yet." A loud explosion rocked the building, shaking the very foundation of the command center. Graves looked up. "We've got seconds," he muttered. "This ends now." In one swift motion, Graves charged, his rifle held at the ready. Vexar fired, the pulse of energy just missing him by inches. Graves dove behind the control panels, using his tactical instincts to close the gap. Vexar's shield flickered as Graves fired again, and this time, the shot hit. The shield cracked, the energy field dissipating with a violent burst. Without hesitation, Graves moved in for the kill. Vexar stumbled back, his armor weakened. Graves didn't give him a chance to recover. With a single, lethal shot, he ended the Vexari commander's reign. Silence fell. The command center, once buzzing with alien chatter, was now eerily still. Graves stood over the fallen commander, his breath steady despite the chaos that had unfolded. This was just the beginning, but the victory, however small, felt like a rare light in a world consumed by darkness. "Mission complete," he said, his voice cold. "Get the extraction ready." But just as he turned to leave, a chilling voice echoed through the wreckage. "You think this is over, human?" It was a whisper, coming from the shadows. "You've only made it worse." Graves froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. The battle was far from over, and the true cost of their fight was only beginning to reveal itself. The war for Earth had just taken its first real turn. The air inside the Vexari command center was thick with smoke and the faint hum of damaged systems. Graves took a moment to catch his breath, his fingers still gripping the rifle. The Vexari commander lay motionless on the floor, the metallic scent of blood mixing with the stale air. For a brief moment, the world outside felt distant. His mission had been successful, but the taste of victory was bitter. "Graves," Kane's voice crackled over the comms, pulling him back to reality. "We're holding the perimeter, but reinforcements are closing in. You need to move. Now." Graves didn't respond right away. His gaze remained fixed on the fallen commander, the weight of the situation sinking in. The Vexari might have lost their leader, but the war was far from over. He could feel it in his bones. The next phase of humanity's struggle had already begun. He turned toward the exit, his mind already on the next objective. The battle was far from over, and every second mattered. He moved quickly, stepping over the bodies of the Vexari officers who had once commanded this place. His team was scattered across the battlefield, but they had bought him the time he needed. Now, it was up to him to make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain. Outside, the scene had worsened. The once pristine cityscape was now a charred wasteland. Fires burned in every direction, casting an orange glow on the wreckage of buildings that had been torn apart by the Vexari's relentless assault. The distant sound of their warships hovering above sent a chill through Graves. Even with their command structure crippled, the enemy wasn't backing down. If anything, they were ramping up their efforts. He reached the perimeter, where Kane and the rest of his squad were huddled behind what little cover was left. They'd been fighting nonstop for hours, but their spirits were still strong. Graves couldn't help but feel a pang of pride. These soldiers, these survivors, had made it this far because of their grit, their unity. But that unity was fragile. "Graves," Kane said, her voice still sharp but with an edge of exhaustion. "The Vexari aren't just retreating. We've intercepted their comms. They're mobilizing their entire fleet. We're not facing just their ground forces anymore. They're calling for reinforcements from the Central Command." Graves' eyes narrowed. This was exactly what he had feared. The Vexari weren't just here to conquer, they were here to erase humanity completely. He had only delayed their plans, not ended them. "What's our status?" he asked, turning to his team. "Low on ammo," Sergeant West replied, his voice gravelly. His face was streaked with dirt and blood, but his eyes were focused. "We've got enough for one more fight, but after that we're out." "Not enough," Graves muttered. He looked up at the sky, the sounds of the Vexari fleet growing louder by the second. "We need a way out. I'll figure something out." Graves' mind raced. The situation was dire, but there had to be a way to leverage what little advantage they had left. They couldn't defeat the Vexari head-on, not without reinforcements. But he had an idea. It was risky, but it might be their only shot. "We've got one shot at this," Graves said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We need to reach the uplink station, 2 clicks northeast. There's a communications relay there. If we can get it up and running, we can send a distress signal to the Federation. They'll know what's happened. They'll send reinforcements." "But that's right in the middle of their encirclement," Kane protested, her eyes flashing. "It's a suicide mission." Graves met her gaze, his expression hardening. "We don't have time to think about it. It's our only chance." A heavy silence settled over the group, each soldier understanding the gravity of the situation. They had fought tooth and nail to get this far, but now, they were facing the real possibility that they might not make it out alive. But if they didn't act, humanity was finished. "You heard the captain," Kane said, her voice firm, rallying the squad. "We do this, or we die trying. Get ready." The soldiers adjusted their weapons, reloading and checking their gear. The tension was palpable. Graves knew the risks, but he also knew that every moment spent waiting was a moment the Vexari could use to crush them completely. They had to move fast. The group moved out in a tight formation, staying low and using the ruined buildings as cover. The Vexari had advanced too quickly, leaving little room for maneuver, but Graves trusted his squad. They knew how to fight in urban warfare. They'd done it countless times before. As they neared the uplink station, Graves' instincts kicked in. The enemy's presence was growing stronger. His gut told him they were being herded into a trap, but there was no turning back now. They had to keep pushing. Suddenly, a sharp, metallic clang echoed from the distance. The ground trembled as the sound of Vexari war machines rumbled toward them. Graves motioned for the team to split. They needed to stay unpredictable, to avoid being pinned down. The last thing they needed was to get caught in a crossfire. "Contact!" West yelled. The ground erupted as plasma fire shot past them, narrowly missing. The squad hit the ground, returning fire as they scrambled for cover. Graves' heart raced, but his mind remained clear. He knew the plan. They had to reach the uplink station. It was humanity's last hope. The squad moved with precision, clearing the enemy's path as they advanced. Graves could feel the weight of their mission on his shoulders. This wasn't just about surviving, it was about ensuring humanity's future. He wasn't about to let that slip away. They reached the uplink station just as the first wave of Vexari reinforcements arrived. Graves had no time to waste. He rushed forward, his rifle slung over his shoulder, and pried open the door to the relay room. He activated the systems, his fingers flying over the console as the machine whirred to life. "Graves!" Kane's voice crackled through the comms. "We've got incoming! They're about to break through! Just hold them off!" Graves shouted back, his eyes glued to the display. "The signal's almost there!" He hit the final command, sending the distress signal into the vastness of space. A moment of silence followed. Then, a burst of static filled his comms, followed by the unmistakable sound of a Federation response. "This is Federation Command. Reinforcements are en route. Hold your position, Graves allowed himself a breath, his heart pounding. But it wasn't over. The Vexari were still closing in, and they were far from finished. "Get ready," Graves said, turning to the squad. "We've done our part. Now we fight until the end." The battle for Earth had shifted. But it wasn't over yet. Graves didn't know how long he'd been fighting, but time had lost its meaning the moment the Vexari reinforcements arrived. The uplink station had sent the distress signal. The Federation had responded. But there was no guarantee that reinforcements would make it in time. All they had now were the weapons in their hands and the will to survive. The squad had managed to establish a perimeter around the uplink station, but it was a fragile defense. Vexari war machines were pounding at their position, and the sound of their mechanized footsteps reverberated through the ruined city like an approaching storm. Graves' eyes scanned the horizon, calculating their next move, knowing full well that they couldn't hold out forever. "Graves, they're advancing faster than expected." Kane's voice crackled over the comms, laced with urgency. "If we don't get that signal through soon, we're done." "I know," Graves replied, his voice tight with frustration. His fingers gripped the edge of his rifle. His team had held their ground longer than he'd expected, but the Vexari were relentless. "Hold as long as you can. We've got one chance." He wasn't sure if his words were meant to reassure Kane or himself. The ground beneath them rumbled again, louder this time. Graves' heart skipped a beat as a massive Vexari warship appeared on the horizon, its sleek, alien design casting an imposing shadow over the city. The ship was far larger than any vessel Graves had seen before. This wasn't just an assault force, it was their final act of desperation. "Graves!" West's voice broke through the static, urgent and fearful. "They've got reinforcements. A whole battalion of elites is marching our way. If they breach the uplink, it's over." Graves' mind raced. There was no more time to strategize, no more time for subtlety. This was a direct confrontation, and they had to make every moment count. The Federation couldn't afford to lose this battle, and neither could humanity. "Take cover!" Graves shouted to his team. "We're holding them here. We can't let them breach the uplink." He raised his rifle, targeting the first wave of Vexari soldiers emerging from the ruins. The blast of energy from his rifle tore through the air, striking down one of the advancing soldiers. The rest followed suit, their alien weapons charging up, firing back in retaliation. The fight was brutal, a cacophony of fire and explosions, but Graves' squad held steady. They were outnumbered, but not outclassed. Not yet. The Vexari, for all their technological superiority, didn't understand the human spirit. And that spirit, the one that had kept humanity alive against impossible odds, was what Graves was counting on now. "Keep them off the uplink!" Graves barked, his voice low but commanding. "We're not dying here." The firefight intensified as more Vexari forces poured in. Their war machines, massive, insect-like walkers, advanced relentlessly, their weapons tearing through the ground. Graves' squad was doing their best to hold them off, but they were fighting against a tide of firepower and overwhelming numbers. The odds were slipping further and further away from their favor. West and Kane were holding the left flank, but Graves could see them starting to fall back. Their ammo was running low. The alien weapons were stronger, more precise. But Graves had a secret weapon that they didn't know about. He just needed a little more time to execute it. "Kane, West, fall back to the station!" Graves shouted. "We're going to need heavy firepower. Get to the relay. We'll cover you." "Graves, that's suicide!" Kane yelled back, her voice tight with urgency. "We're not gonna." "Just go!" Graves interrupted. "We hold this line." "Now!" For a brief moment, Graves saw hesitation in Kane's eyes. But then, with a quick nod, she turned and sprinted toward the uplink station. West followed closely behind, taking down a few more Vexari soldiers before retreating into the building. The moment they were out of sight, Graves turned back to face the advancing Vexari. He gritted his teeth. The countdown was on. He had to stall them, keep them distracted for just a little longer. The air was thick with tension as the Vexari war machines closed in. Graves' squad continued to pick off soldiers, but every shot seemed to be more futile than the last. There were too many. Too much firepower. And then, through the smoke and dust, Graves saw something that made his blood run cold. A Vexari elite, a massive figure clad in black armor, stood at the edge of the battlefield. The alien wore an energy shield around his body, making him nearly invincible. His weapon was far larger than anything Graves had ever seen, a massive cannon capable of leveling entire cities. "Kane!" Graves shouted into the comms. "Get back here, now!" But the sound of explosions drowned out his voice. The Vexari elite raised his weapon, charging it for a devastating shot. Graves moved faster than he thought possible, his heart pounding in his chest. He raised his rifle and fired off 2 quick shots, but they ricocheted off the energy shield. His heart sank. He needed to get closer. He needed to get through that shield. With a quick calculation, Graves reached for the grenade strapped to his belt. He pulled the pin and hurled it toward the Vexari elite, who was still focusing on the uplink station. The grenade detonated in midair, sending a shockwave through the ground. The elite staggered back, his shield flickering for a moment. Graves didn't waste time. He charged, closing the distance, his rifle raised. The elite barely had time to react before Graves was upon him. With a final, brutal shot to the exposed weak point in his armor, Graves brought the giant alien to his knees. It was a temporary victory, one that bought his squad the time they needed. As Graves stood over the fallen elite, his comms crackled to life. "Graves, we've got Federation reinforcements inbound." Kane's voice sounded like music to his ears. "They're a few minutes out, but we're not alone anymore. Hold on, just a little longer." Relief flooded through him, but there was no time for celebration. The Vexari were still pressing forward. But now they had a chance. A real chance. Graves' squad regrouped quickly, taking advantage of the Vexari's momentary confusion. They launched a final assault, driving back the remaining forces as the Federation ships arrived overhead. But as the battle raged on, Graves knew that this fight, this war, was far from over. The victory here wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. "We've won this round," Graves muttered to himself. "But the real battle is just starting." The distant hum of Federation ships breaking through Earth's atmosphere filled Graves' ears, the sound so familiar it was like the final echo of a long-forgotten promise. His chest heaved with exhaustion, but there was no time for rest. The battlefield was still a chaotic mess of fire and destruction, and the Vexari were far from defeated. The Federation had arrived, but the real battle for Earth had only just begun. Graves stood tall, his rifle slung over his shoulder, scanning the horizon. The smoke from the Vexari's war machine still hung heavy in the air, and the ruins of the city stretched for miles, an urban graveyard. The faintest sounds of scattered gunfire echoed in the distance, a reminder that the Vexari were regrouping. They weren't finished. Not by a long shot. "Graves!" Kane's voice broke through the comms. "We've got them on the run, but we need your position. The Federation forces are establishing a perimeter, but the Vexari commander, the one who replaced Vexar, is trying to rally his troops. We need him taken out, or we'll never secure the area." Graves exhaled sharply. The Vexari were relentless, their leadership a rotating wheel of cold, calculating commanders, all with one goal, Earth's total destruction. He had hoped that killing Vexar would have shattered their resolve, but the enemy had shown time and again that they could always replace their fallen leaders with someone worse. "I'm on it," Graves said, his voice steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. "Kane, hold the line. I'll deal with their new commander." Graves moved quickly, his boots crunching against the fractured pavement, the remnants of shattered glass and concrete marking his path. The Federation had landed, their ships scattered across the battlefield, providing fire support and backup to the human resistance. But the Vexari were regrouping, and their new commander, if he was anything like Vexar, would not be easy to take down. The buildings around him were still standing, though barely. The shattered remnants of what had once been a thriving city now stood as monuments to humanity's defiance. Graves took cover behind a collapsed wall, peering through a gap to see the Vexari commander. He was tall, even by Vexari standards, and cloaked in a sleek black armor that absorbed the dim light around him, making him nearly invisible against the backdrop of the smoldering city. The new commander had an air of cold efficiency. His soldiers, elite warriors, moved in synchronized patterns, clearing the area, setting up defensive positions. It was clear they were preparing for another wave of assault, but Graves wasn't about to wait for them to make the first move. "Kane," Graves said into the comms. "I'm engaging now. Cover me." "Copy that," Kane replied. "We'll keep the pressure on their flanks. You've got a clear shot. Make it count." Graves didn't hesitate. He moved swiftly, crawling low across the debris-strewn ground, staying out of the commander's line of sight. The tension in the air was palpable. Every step, every breath could mean life or death. He reached an elevated vantage point, overlooking the Vexari position, and raised his rifle. The new commander was giving orders, his back turned. Graves aimed, steadying his breath. One shot. He couldn't afford to miss. Suddenly, the commander turned, as if sensing something out of place. His eyes locked on Graves, and in that moment, time seemed to slow. Graves squeezed the trigger, the sound of the shot echoing in the silence. The Vexari commander stumbled back, a look of disbelief crossing his face before he collapsed to the ground. But the victory was short-lived. The commander's bodyguards, massive soldiers clad in reflective black armor, reacted instantly, charging toward Graves' position. Their weapons, long energy lances, crackled to life, the blue glow lighting up the darkened battlefield. Graves quickly retreated, using the terrain to cover his movements, his mind racing to process the sudden turn of events. More Vexari soldiers appeared, surrounding the area in a coordinated move. The enemy was not just retreating, they were adapting, evolving their tactics with every loss. "Graves, we need to pull back." Kane's voice came through again. "The Federation is securing the perimeter, but the Vexari are regrouping faster than we anticipated. We can't afford to lose more ground." Graves ignored the voice in his comms, pushing himself harder, faster. He couldn't afford to pull back. Not yet. He had to buy more time. The sounds of battle intensified as Graves fought his way through the increasingly dense Vexari forces. His squad was spread out, providing cover, but they were being pushed back. The Vexari's elite soldiers were closing in, and their relentless pursuit made it clear that they would not give up easily. Graves ducked into a narrow alley, trying to regroup, but the overwhelming sense of being trapped was suffocating. The enemy wasn't just fighting with weapons, they were fighting with intelligence, adapting and responding to every move Graves made. He needed a way out. He needed a new plan. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the ground beneath him, sending him stumbling forward. He crashed against the wall, his helmet rattling with the force of the impact. When his vision cleared, he saw a massive Vexari war machine, its cannons trained on him. The machine was the size of a small building, with thick plating and weapons that could obliterate anything in its path. Graves didn't have time to think. His rifle was useless against the war machine's heavy armor, and the only option left was to run. But as he turned to retreat, a figure emerged from the smoke, a figure he knew all too well. The Vexari commander, alive. "You think you've won?" The commander sneered, his voice amplified through a speaker in his helmet. "This is just the beginning. You've played right into our hands." Graves froze. The Federation had arrived, yes. But this was a trap. A trap set by the Vexari, and now humanity was on the verge of being wiped out. "We'll see about that," Graves said, his voice cold and resolute. He turned and charged forward, determined to make the final stand, to show the Vexari that humanity would not be extinguished without a fight. The Federation forces were in position, but they were still too far out. Graves had only moments before the Vexari forces overran their defenses. The situation had shifted dramatically in the last few hours. What was supposed to be a victory was now a desperate struggle for survival. But Graves had one final trick up his sleeve. He wasn't about to let Earth's last hope slip through his fingers. With one final breath, he sprinted toward the war machine, his rifle raised. The last battle had begun. And this time, humanity wasn't going down without a fight.